So this is a winder made for making the coils for the stator. Just spent about a 7 or 8 inch tail just to go into that slot there, and that little plastic bit there to keep the 3 wires I've got in line as I turn it, as you can see here. So you can keep a bit of tension on it all the time, and that bit of plastic helps keep the 3 wires together. Now, the only thing at the start here, you can see that tail is starting to push back in, so I've got a bit of piece of wood here to use to squeeze it back out. Don't use a screwdriver or anything metallic, use a piece of wood, otherwise you could risk damaging the enamel on the wire itself. So as you try to keep the tension on it, you work it from side to side, keeping the wires in line as much as you can, going from side to side. Now the actual winder itself, if I remember correctly, was made from 12mm ply with a 12mm spacer on the inside, and there we go, just pushing that tail back out. And I think I put a little spacer on that middle bit, so that was actually ever so slightly more than 12mm in width. So the 3 screws, which you can see there, they are also only nipped up very, very lightly, just enough to take up the slack, but not actually under tension. The only one actually under tension is the middle screw, which is what allows the whole thing to turn. So I have got on here 3 drums, which are 3 spools of copper wire which go through that little bit of plastic, and on that I have some tape in the middle of each of these spools, so that there's a bit of friction between the spool, so that the turning action doesn't cause the spools to turn faster. So it requires the turning action of the winder to pull those 3 coils out of the way, helping to apply some of the pressure that's also been put onto the coils as the wind. So when you get to about halfway, which is what I'm about to here, I'm using a piece of ply which I made the winder with. It's about 12mm, it just neatly fits in that gap there, and you can use that to just chap down and compress the sides to just make it a little bit tighter. Now, of course it's wooden again, you don't want to damage the enamel in any way, so the wood itself, the plywood here, is soft enough to not allow any of that kind of damage to happen. So once we get onto there, it's just carrying on, working it from side to side, watching where the copper is going while keeping it flat as possible, so you get as tightest coil as you're turning. So you just watch what's happening in each part as you wind it around, and move these 3 strands as required to keep the coil to be as level and even as possible as it's worked up, going across by each turn. Now on that, my own winder here, you can probably see that I've got a little black mark up where the slots are. That's just a sort of visual cue for me in terms of the counting process, but you can use whatever you want to sort of keep a tally on how many turns you've actually done at any given time. So eventually, of course, you get to near the end, and you can, so what we have is, that's me putting the pressure back on that last winding. It's just wind it back and then turn it around again just to get that tension, because the coils on the very end turns are the ones that are slackest. So once I got that, just cut the wires out of the way, and I'm holding it of course at the same time when I'm doing this. I'm sort of covering the camera a little bit, but what I'm actually doing here is I'm holding the wires with my finger in my left hand while pulling the wires on the right to get the tension on it, but before that I bend it into the slot, so there's tension getting put on the diode wire and then into the slot. That's just to stop it from trying to unspring itself. So now I've got it there, I can use that piece of plywood again just to chap it down one side and the other side, and that hopefully should give us the finished shape of the coil for it to fit neatly into its position. That there's only a space for one coil and there's not much space for us to be much error than this, so it helps to have the coils fairly accurately sized. So this is just ordinary electrical tape here, it's nothing special about it. The last time I made a stator I used the same colour of tape, and then this time I'm deciding, since it is a 3-phase stator, I'm going to use 3 colours of tape, so a different colour for each phase. So that just sort of lets me see it once the stator is actually made, that I can see the colour of the tape through the resin, and I can identify each coil quite quickly as to where it belongs in the hierarchy of the stator itself. So rather than the previous one where the coil just looked like a mass of coils going round in a circle, it's difficult to really tell which one is which. So this is here just to help me identify. So I've put this through, a little bit of tension on the tape just to sort of give it some tightness. It's nothing special with this tape, it's just the regular electrical tape. So once you get that fed through and then wrapped round, just a little bit footery, that's why I put a tab on. I folded back a tab to make it easier to go through and then just cut that off, and then once you get that through, you can then just put some pressure on it so that when it comes out of the winder it's holding all the coils just where you would want everything to be. So that's just, you just pull a bit at it, there you go, a bit of tension round over the end, cut it off and then stick it down, and that's good to go. So I'm just taking the big nut off the centre here. And then the small ones, as I said, barely half a turn to actually slacken it off to finger tight. It doesn't need to be tight, you don't want it to be, you end up squeezing and compressing the winder and you end up lose shape of the coil, so it just needs to be there holding it in place, nothing more. Now I did put a tiny little smidgen of grease on those screws at the start just to sort of make the screws slide through the wood a bit easier, just to allow this sort of removal part to be a bit easier. So that there and there, squeezing these screws through, if there's any grip there it can be a bit more footery. So this just, these 6 wires I got there are just getting in the way slightly, but you've got to watch out for it. So eventually you get the front cover off and you're starting to see the coil. So what I decided to do this time, since the last coil is the slackest one because it's on the outside, I opted this time to put some more tape on the top near the point where the coil winding comes to an end, just as a extra support, but that's really up to you if you do anything like that. Right, so good. One coil done. And so the thing you can do, of course, is once you've got some of the coils made, you can weigh them. Now the thing that's sitting on is actually the mould I'll make the stator with. You can see the marks in the wood, but you check the weights here, you'll see they're coming to about the 494 sort of 4 type sort of. That just lets you see that the amount of copper each one is broadly the same. Now the tails themselves are not all cut exactly the same, so there is a little bit of a variability which I'm not too worried about. So once you're sort of like happy with that, then you can, as you can see, I've got them all done now, so now it's time to solder them all up and time to get that job done.